Well, guys, since I've been inspired by the SE function enough that I recorded a whole video about it, about the grip state, returning to it because I thought there were some confusions around the notion that I believed were usefully cleared. I'm still inspired by SE, and I want to share some reflections I had about how the spiritualized INFJ relates to SE, also the secure INFJ, because again, as you know, their internal modes of functioning differ, but the external behavior has a lot of similarities between the secure INFJ and the spiritualized INFJ. And so the way that they handle SE tends to look similar, right? So, and the first thing that we can say is that since these are pretty healthy types, one being the embodiment of a happy childhood, a childhood that was not just happy, but constructive, and allowed them to constitute a springboard toward adulthood and a responsible and full adult life, the secure INFJ. The other having dealt with more insecurities in childhood and in adolescence and adulthood, but still managed through, various trials and experiences to follow a path of individuation, individuation being the more neutral synonym term for spiritualization, which is more of an INFJ term. These types are, in these particular incarnations, healthy types, which means that they should have quite a healthy relationship with the SE function, okay? And so maybe that can be used as an exemplar of good SE use for INFJs, and a sort of a pointer toward maybe certain aspirations for those people among us, many among us, who are leaning still more towards either compliance, adaptive submission, or solipsism, social withdrawal. So, in the world of the adaptive submissive, SE doesn't really exist that much. It exists even less in the world of the solipsist, of course, who almost makes it a virtue of ignoring the extroverted functions. That's not a good idea, but that's what the solipsist mistakenly believes. Now, in the world of the spiritualized INFJ and of the secure INFJ, the relationship with SE is a good illustration of how these subtypes of INFJ relate to all the functions. There is a kind of balance between the three functions. And then when I say a balance between the three functions, I'm saying this on purpose. I'm not saying four functions, because NI in the life of the NI dominant is, I'm gonna come out and say something kind of blunt, extreme, perhaps radical, but this is something that I'm coming to believe more and more. It is not really true that we use NI. It is truer to say that NI uses us. NI guides us, NI speaks through us. The best thing we can do is to let this do this work unhindered. Just let it take care of itself. NI takes care of itself. NI is our world. Where we can influence it usually is by obstructing it, interfering with it, and usually for no good reason, or at least with no good results. So I'm starting to talk about the way the NI dominant relates to the NI function, not by, metaphors of using, by images of using, but rather maybe by metaphors of attunement, of alignment, of channeling, all right? Because your dominant function is your world. It's not switched off. It's only switched off when you die, okay? The other three functions are not your world, and you do use them. And the more individuated, the more secure the INFJ, just like any other type in relation to their own function stacks, will tend to have a balanced use of all three functions. And that applies to SE as well. So the spiritualized INFJ is not dominated by SE, because you could actually argue that the more insecure kinds of INFJ are dominated by SE. They would like to think they're not. They're ignoring it. But in fact, it is precisely for the sake of ignoring it that they lead those somewhat maladaptive lives. So SE, yes, is neglected. SE is ignored, but it looms so large in the behaviors and decisions that constitute the lives of these INFJs. You could actually really truthfully describe those modes of living as attempts to not look at SE. And that's not the case with the spiritualized INFJ, right? And whenever I say spiritualized, you can sort of do the mental gymnastics of assuming I'm also talking about the secure. A spiritualized INFJ is someone who may one evening have a gargantuan meal, but they're not going to have the same gargantuan meal the day after. They're not in the grip of SE. They're much more instinctive in that respect. They're much more in tune with the wishes and drives of their bodies. So I think that's an interesting image. If they feel like having a gargantuan meal, they will do that, but they're not neurotic in relation to those urges. They will engage SE when they feel like engaging SE. Go out, play some sport, go out in nature, have loving relationships, have intimate relationships, enjoy really good art, not focus too much on the intellectual side of good art, where everything has to be abstracted and discussed with a very serious expression, to try to meticulously, like a surgeon, analyze what's the meaning. No, they will often just lose themselves in the art, and sometimes they might not even feel like trying to analyze it too much. Now, it's true that a few days later, perhaps they will come up with some insight. Of course, they'll have fed NI. They'll have allowed themselves to feed their NI with an SE experience. So NI is going to do the work, but NI is working by itself. It takes care of itself. So it's the lack of trust in NI, which is also a lack of trust in SE, because NI-SE is an axis. You should never forget that. That ends up thwarting the ways of NI. An INFJ might think, well, my NI will never be better than if I, really try to think a lot, really try to parse things, to untangle things in my mind, perform all these acrobatics. It's like, no, you're just mentally masturbating. Your superego is not liking that, but in a sense, you're following your superego in doing that too. And the process is actually an obstruction, an obfuscation of your perceiving world, which is still your world. It is what dominates your world. So in a sense, you're not following your vital drives, your vital needs. Whereas the spiritualized INFJ does that naturally. They have just come to a point where they're so individuated that the unconscious no longer threatens them. They have integrated enough of it that they live with it. So the shadow, the idea that they've integrated a lot of their shadow, is another way of saying they have managed to tame the wilder sides of their SE. And they've done it often by learning that they don't need to be scared of SE. And they learn that they don't need to be scared of SE by appreciating that they have a lot of inner strength. And they have appreciated they have a lot of inner strength because they have managed to get to a stage of self-acceptance. Self-acceptance, when it is truly achieved, is always associated with the recognition of inner strength, higher confidence, and then a willingness to stop just sticking to the ways and activities that we know we're good at and we know are familiar, because they're not going to be threatening. But they're also kind of life-reducing, they're enervating, they're not enhancing. You need to push your way out of those comfort zones as well. But for that to enter the SE world, you need to have real faith in your ego strength. And for that, you need self-acceptance. That's my opportunity as a last point to direct you to my recent video on self-acceptance. Give me a like if you enjoyed the video, guys, of course. And don't forget, I've written 2 books on the INFJ, my favorite type, I guess, in many ways. My favorite type, certainly, to try to understand. It's a difficult task because it's a complex type. My latest book, The Infinite Soul, INFJ Life in the Modern World. How INFJs can lead productive, meaningful, purposeful, and rich lives on so many levels. In a world that they often see as hostile, and for good reason. This book looks at how you can manage that. So have a look at the first link below and the reviews. It already has helped a lot of people, so I recommend you check it out. As well as the previous work, which is called The Ecstatic Soul. INFJs are infinite, but also ecstatic. A new look at the INFJ personality. This is the deepest investigation into the mind of the INFJ. What's it like to think like an INFJ? What's it like to feel and be an INFJ? If you want to know more about this, No book goes deeper, and also again, check the reviews. Lastly, guys, my channel very much depends on your kind support. I encourage you to have a look at my Patreon page down below if you'd like to support me. For a not very expensive price, you get access to very cool perks like the Discord server, the Fourfold, you can interact with me and the others there, access to bonus video content every 2 weeks, but perhaps primarily you help me keep the channel going because I could not do it without you. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.